At my youngest son's funeral, my daughter-in-law mocked loudly, "Now the old hag's going straight to the retirement dump." Then the lawyer revealed the will my son signed from the ICU. She would only inherit everything if we lived under the same roof. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The funeral home's artificial lighting cast a sickly glow over Anthony's face. My son, my baby boy at just 28, looked like he was sleeping, but the waxy stillness of his features told the cruel truth. I reached out with trembling fingers to touch his hand one last time, my heart splintering at how cold he felt. This wasn't supposed to happen. Parents aren't meant to bury their children. "Mrs. Palmer, would you like a moment alone?" the funeral director asked, his practiced sympathy barely masking his impatience. I nodded, unable to find words through the rock lodged in my throat. "I'm Fatima Palmer, 65 years old, and yesterday I was a mother of 2. Today, I'm a mother of 1. My elder son lives across the country and couldn't make it back in time. Anthony had been my rock, my daily joy, my reason to keep going after my husband died 6 years ago. A sudden aneurysm took him from me without warning. One minute he was complaining about a headache, the next he was in the ICU, and 3 days later, he was gone." The murmur of voices in the viewing room grew louder as more people arrived. I reluctantly stepped away from the casket, making room for others to pay their respects. That's when I saw her, Rebecca, Anthony's wife of just 2 years. She stood with a small cluster of her friends, her black dress impossibly tight and short, her makeup flawless despite the occasion. Not a single tear had fallen from those expertly lined eyes. I tried to be understanding. People grieve differently. But something in her demeanor, a certain lightness, an almost imperceptible relief, made my skin crawl. "Mrs. Palmer." Anthony's best friend Mark approached, pulling me into a tight hug. "I still can't believe he's gone." His voice broke, and I felt a surge of gratitude for his genuine grief, so different from the performance my daughter-in-law was putting on across the room. The next few hours passed in a blur of condolences and shared memories. I stood until my feet ached, accepted hugs until my shoulders grew stiff, nodded at stories about Anthony until my neck felt locked in place. The funeral director finally announced it was time for the family's final moments before the service. Rebecca sauntered over, her friends trailing behind her like an entourage. She glanced at me with thinly veiled annoyance. "We should get this over with," she said, checking her watch. "I have a lot to deal with after this." I bit my tongue. This wasn't the time or place. We gathered around Anthony's casket for those final, excruciating minutes. I placed my hand over his, whispering my last goodbye to my son, tears flowing freely down my weathered cheeks. That's when I heard it. "Now the old lady goes straight to the nursing home." Rebecca's voice, meant to be a whisper to her friend, carried in the quiet room. The friend laughed, then quickly stifled it when she realized others might have heard. I froze, my hand still on Anthony's, the words hitting me like a physical blow. The room seemed to spin around me, faces blurring through my tears. I'd always known Rebecca didn't like me, but this was cruelty beyond anything I'd imagined. "Mrs. Palmer?" A man in a dark suit approached, his expression somber. "I'm James Bryant, your son's attorney. I'm terribly sorry for your loss, but there's something important we need to discuss immediately after the service." I nodded numbly, still reeling from Rebecca's comment. What could possibly be so urgent that it couldn't wait until tomorrow? The service passed in a fog of grief. I barely registered the pastor's words, the hymns, the procession to the cemetery. All I could hear was Rebecca's voice over and over. "Now the old lady goes straight to the nursing home." After the burial, James approached again. "Mrs. Palmer, if you could join me and Mrs. Palmer, Rebecca, in my car. There's something your son wanted me to share with both of you." Rebecca looked annoyed, but followed us to his car. Inside, James pulled out a document from his briefcase. Anthony executed this will 3 days ago, from his hospital bed, James explained. He was very explicit about its terms. Rebecca leaned forward, suddenly interested. What terms? James looked, between us, his expression unreadable. Rebecca, Anthony has left everything to you. The house, his savings, his half of the business. But there's one condition. My heart pounded as Rebecca's lips curved into a smug smile. What condition? She asked. Fatima must live with you, under the same roof. If she moves out or if you force her out, everything transfers to her immediately. The smile vanished from Rebecca's face. That's ridiculous. He can't do that. I assure you, he can. And he did. James handed her the document. This was his final wish. I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing. My son, even in his final moments, had thought of me. He'd known, somehow, he'd known what Rebecca would do. As the reality of the situation dawned, on her, Rebecca turned to me, her eyes blazing with hatred. But behind that hatred, I saw something else. Fear. Because now, whether she liked it or not, we were bound together by Anthony's last wish. And neither of us had any idea what kind of hell was about to unfold. You can take the guest bedroom, Rebecca said, dropping my suitcase at the door rather than carrying it inside. Bathrooms down the hall. Don't use all the hot water. I stood in the doorway of what was now supposed to be my room, taking in the bare walls, the thin layer of dust on the dresser, and the stripped mattress. This wasn't a guest bedroom. This was a storage room that happened to have a bed frame in it. Boxes were stacked in one corner, and the closet door was blocked by an old exercise bike. I'll need some sheets, I said quietly. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Check the linen closet. I'm not your maid. It had been exactly 2 weeks since Anthony's funeral. 2 weeks of arrangements and paperwork and numb, crushing grief. Now here I was, moving into my son's house, a house I'd helped him buy with money from selling my own home after my husband died. A house where I was clearly unwelcome. That night, I lay in bed staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the sounds of Rebecca moving around downstairs. Music played, glasses clinked, laughter erupted. She had friends over. I wasn't invited. I clutched Anthony's watch to my chest, the only personal item of his I'd managed to keep before Rebecca. Packed everything away? The tears came again, hot and relentless. My beautiful boy. How could he be gone? And how could I be trapped here with the woman who despised me? The next morning, I ventured downstairs to find the kitchen in disarray. Empty wine bottles, dirty glasses, pizza boxes strewn across the counter. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen, probably still asleep. I sighed and began cleaning up, if only to give myself something to do. As I wiped down the counters, I noticed something strange. The refrigerator, which had always been covered with photos. Anthony and Rebecca on their honeymoon, Anthony at his business opening, Anthony with his friends, was now bare. I opened it to find it nearly empty, save for some yogurt, a bottle of white wine, and takeout containers. I made a mental note to go shopping. If I was going to live here, I needed to eat. The weeks that followed established a painful pattern. Rebecca would leave without telling me where she was going, return at odd hours, sometimes with friends who would stare at me like I was an intruder. She'd forget to tell me important things. That the internet was being serviced, that the water would be shut off for repairs, that she'd invited her parents for dinner. One morning, I couldn't find my heart medication. I always kept it on my nightstand, but it wasn't there. I searched my entire room, growing increasingly panicked. Finally, I found it in the bathroom cabinet, behind cleaning supplies I never used. I knew I hadn't put it there. Rebecca, I confronted her that evening. Did you move my medication? She didn't look up from her phone. Why would I touch your pills? I found them in the bathroom cabinet, behind the cleaning supplies. She shrugged. Maybe you put them there and forgot. Isn't forgetfulness common at your age? The casual cruelty stung, but I said nothing more. I knew what she was doing. She wanted me to leave, to forfeit my son's legacy to her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. One afternoon, I was sorting through some of my things when I overheard Rebecca on the phone in the kitchen. No, she's still here, she said in a hushed voice. I know it's a nightmare. I'm working on it. There has to be a way around the will. I already looked into Sunny Pines. It's the cheapest one in the area, barely passes inspection. No, I don't care if it's clean, I just need her out of here. My blood ran cold. Sunny Pines. She'd been researching nursing homes, cheap ones with poor reputations, even before Anthony died. Her comment at the funeral hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment cruelty. It had been a plan. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Anthony, about the life we'd shared, about the man he'd been. Had he known about Rebecca's true nature? Had he suspected she'd try to discard me like yesterday's trash? Is that why he'd made that stipulation in his will? The next morning, I found a photo of Anthony and me in the trash, one that had been on the refrigerator. It had been torn down the middle, separating us. Rebecca had thrown away my half but kept his. Something inside me hardened. I retrieved both halves, carefully taped them back together, and placed the photo in my room. Then I went to the store and bought groceries, cleaning supplies, and a small potted plant. When I returned, I cleaned the kitchen thoroughly, made a proper meal for the first time since moving in, and placed the plant on the windowsill. Rebecca came home to find me setting the table. "What's all this?" she asked, eyeing the roasted chicken and vegetables with suspicion. "Dinner," I said simply. "You're welcome to join me." Her eyes narrowed. "I already have plans." Another night, then. I kept my voice light. She stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to decipher my game. Then she grabbed her purse and left without another word. As I ate alone at the table my son had once shared meals at, I made a decision. Rebecca wanted a war, but I wouldn't give her one. I wouldn't break, I wouldn't complain, and I certainly wouldn't leave. I would build a life here, right under her nose. I would honor Anthony's memory by staying strong, and maybe, just maybe, I would uncover why my son had felt the need to protect me from his wife in the first place. Later that night, as I was putting away some of my clothes, I noticed a loose floorboard under the area rug in my room. Curious, I pried it up to find a small space beneath, and inside, a leather-bound book. My heart quickened as I recognized Anthony's handwriting on the first page. My thoughts, fears, and suspicions, it read. "If anything happens to me, please, make sure my mother sees this." With shaking hands, I turned the page and began to read. Anthony's journal trembled in my hands as I turned the pages. His handwriting, always so neat and precise, just like his father's, filled page after page with thoughts I was never meant to hear while he was alive. "I don't know who Rebecca is anymore," he had written 3 months before his death. "When we met, she was kind, attentive, ambitious. Now I see flashes of someone else entirely. Yesterday I overheard her on the phone talking about Mom, saying horrible things about the old woman and how she couldn't wait to be free of her." Free of her? Mom has never been anything but generous to Rebecca. I paused, a tear splashing. Onto the page. I quickly dabbed it away, not wanting to smudge his words, these precious fragments of my son's thoughts. I kept reading, my heart growing heavier with each entry. Rebecca's been pushing me to change my will. She wants everything, in her name only. When I asked about Mom, she said, "Your mother has lived her life. She'll be fine." But I know better. Dad left Mom with almost nothing after his medical bills. She sold her house to help me start my business. She gave everything for me. and now Rebecca wants me to abandon her. I closed my eyes, remembering how I'd sold my home of 30 years after Harold died. The medical bills had been astronomical, and what little savings we had disappeared quickly. Anthony had been desperate to start his own architectural firm, and I couldn't bear to see his dreams die alongside his father. So I sold our family home and gave him the money as an investment, no strings attached. I'm not feeling well, a later entry read. Headaches constantly. Rebecca says it's stress, that I work too much. Maybe she's right. But sometimes I wonder if it's something else. The headaches started right after that big fight about Mom. I told Rebecca that Mom would always have a place with us if she needed it. Rebecca didn't speak to me for 3 days. My fingers traced his words, wishing I could reach through them to touch him again, to warn him. The next few entries detailed his declining health. The headaches grew worse. He mentioned dizziness, blurred vision. Then came the entry that made my blood run cold. Found Rebecca going through my phone last night. She said she was looking for a number, but she was reading my texts with Mom. This morning, my headache was so bad I could barely see. Rebecca made me coffee, insisted I drink it before going to the hospital. I feel strange. Something's not right. That was the day he collapsed. The day he was rushed to the hospital with what would later be diagnosed as a brain aneurysm. The day everything changed. I flipped to the final entry, dated just hours before he lost consciousness for good. If you're reading this, Mom, then I'm gone. I'm writing this with the nurse's help while Rebecca is out of the room. I don't have proof, but I have suspicions. Watch out for her. She's not who I thought she was. I've spoken to James about the will. You'll be protected. I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the journal. What was he saying? That Rebecca might have. No, I couldn't let my mind go there. Aneurysms happen. They're sudden, devastating. The doctors had explained it all. There was no reason to suspect, but why was he so afraid? Why the secrecy? Why change his will at the last minute to ensure I would stay in the house? I carefully returned the journal to its hiding place beneath the floorboard. Whatever Anthony had suspected, he'd been concerned. Enough to take measures to protect me. I needed to understand why. The next morning, Rebecca left early as usual. I took the opportunity to explore the house more thoroughly. Not snooping, I told myself, just getting acquainted with the place that was now partially my home. In Anthony's office, I found his computer still set up on the desk. I hesitated. Would it even still work? Would I know the password? I pressed the power button and to my surprise, it hummed to life. The login screen appeared, asking for a password. I tried Rebecca. Nothing. His birthday. Nothing. Then, on a whim, I typed Fatima Mom 1956, my name and birth year. The screen unlocked. Tears welled in my eyes. Even his password was a sign of his love. I opened his email, feeling slightly guilty, but driven by a need to understand. There were hundreds of messages, mostly work-related. I searched for Rebecca and found several exchanges between them, mostly mundane. Then I saw an email thread with the subject line, Marriage Counseling Options. I think we need professional help, Anthony had written. Things between us have changed. I'm worried about the direction we're heading. Rebecca's reply was curt. We don't need a stranger telling us how to fix our marriage. Either you stop putting your mother before me, or we have bigger problems than counseling can fix. I searched further and found emails to James, his attorney, dated just days before. His hospitalization. I need to make changes to my will. Urgent. Can we meet tomorrow? I have concerns about Rebecca's intentions toward my mother if something happens to me. The next email was a confirmation from James for a meeting that Anthony never made it to. Instead, James had come to the hospital, where Anthony had dictated his final wishes from his ICU bed. I heard the front door slam. Rebecca was home. I quickly shut down the computer and slipped out of the office, my mind racing with what I'd discovered. That night, I lay awake, Anthony's words echoing. In my head, something wasn't right. The pieces didn't quite fit together. Whatever Rebecca had done, or Anthony had suspected her of doing, I needed to be very, very careful, because I was living under the same roof as a woman who might have wanted my son dead. And now she was stuck with me, the last person on earth she wanted around. I clutched Anthony's watch to my chest and made a silent promise. I would find out what happened to my son, and if Rebecca was responsible, she would pay. Not through anger or confrontation, but through the quiet, patient justice that only time can deliver. But first I needed proof. And to get that, I would need to play a dangerous game of pretend with the woman who wished I were already in a nursing home. The morning after discovering Anthony's journal, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Rebecca. Not yet. Instead, I would transform my approach entirely. If I was going to uncover the truth, I needed to change the dynamic between us. I started with breakfast. I woke early before Rebecca and made a full spread. Pancakes, fresh fruit, bacon, coffee brewed just as Anthony used to like it. When Rebecca stumbled into the kitchen, still in her silk pajamas, she stopped short at the sight. "What is this?" she asked, suspicion heavy in her voice. "Breakfast," I said simply, keeping my tone light. "I thought we could start fresh. We're both grieving Anthony in our own ways." She stared at me, then at the food, clearly searching for a trap. Finding none. She cautiously sat down and helped herself to a small portion. "This doesn't change anything," she said between bites. "I know," I replied, "but we're stuck with each other, so we might as well try to make it bearable." For the next 2 weeks, I maintained this approach. I cleaned without complaint, cooked meals, and took care not to intrude on her space. I smiled when she brought friends over, greeted them warmly, then made myself scarce. I was unfailingly polite, even when she was rude. It was exhausting, but it worked. Rebecca's overt hostility gradually shifted to wary confusion. She stopped hiding my medication, though she still made no effort to include me in anything. I was making her comfortable enough that she might let her guard down. On a Tuesday evening, I was working in the small garden I'd started. In the backyard when I overheard Rebecca on the patio phone call. "I don't know what she's up to," she was saying. "It's like she's some kind of Stepford mother-in-law now. No, I don't trust it. Yes, I'm still looking for a way around the will, but James says it's airtight. I know, I just need to wait her out. She's 65. How much longer can she last?" I buried my hands deeper in the soil, pushing down the surge of anger. Patience, I reminded myself. Truth comes to those who wait. My efforts in the garden gradually transformed the neglected backyard. Anthony had always talked about planting roses for me, just like the ones at your old house, Mom, but had never found the time. Now I planted them for him, a vibrant mixture of reds and yellows, his favorite colors, Rebecca noticed. "What are you doing to the yard?" "Just adding some color," I said. Anthony always wanted roses back here. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe even guilt. "Don't change things without asking me first. This is still my house." "Our house," I corrected gently. "According to the will." She stormed back inside. The following weekend, I was making dinner when the doorbell rang. Rebecca was out, so I answered to find a handsome man in his early 30s standing on the porch. "Is Becca home?" he asked, looking past me. "She's out," I replied. "Can I take a message?" He hesitated. "Just tell her Eric stopped by." "Would you like to come in and wait?" "She shouldn't be long." Eric looked uncertain but nodded. "Sure, thanks." I led him to the living room, offered him a drink, and returned to my cooking. 20 minutes later, the front door opened, and Rebecca's voice called out, "Fatima, whose car is that in the—" stopped short when she saw Eric sitting on the couch, her face drained of color. "Eric, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for you," he said simply. "Your mother-in-law was kind enough to let me in." Rebecca shot me a venomous look. "She's not my mother-in-law anymore, and you shouldn't be here." I quietly retreated to the kitchen, but I could still hear their hushed, heated conversation. "We talked about this," Rebecca hissed. "You can't just show up at my house." "Your house? I thought Anthony left it to both of you." "That's temporary, once the old lady's gone." "Jesus, Rebecca. Your husband just died. Don't you think you're moving a bit fast? Don't you dare judge me. You, of all people." Their voices dropped lower, and I could no longer make out the words. Minutes later, the front door slammed, and Rebecca stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. "Don't you ever let anyone into this house without asking me first?" she snapped. I looked up from the stove. "He said he was a friend of yours." "Well, he's not, and I don't need you interfering in my life." "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice even. "I was just trying to be polite." She studied me for a moment, as if trying to determine whether I was sincere. Finally, she turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Dinner smells good," she admitted grudgingly. It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd ever given me. "That? I added another piece to the puzzle. Eric, whoever he was, had known Anthony and knew about the will, and Rebecca didn't want him in the house. Was he just a friend or something more? The next morning, Rebecca left early, as usual. I used the opportunity to examine Anthony's office more thoroughly. In a locked drawer, the key hidden exactly where Anthony always kept spare keys, under the potted plant on his desk, I found a stack of letters. They weren't addressed to anyone, and they weren't signed, but they were in Anthony's handwriting. "Know about him?" one began. "I've known for months. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Do you think I'm blind?" My heart raced as I read on. Anthony had discovered something, an affair, perhaps. But he'd never confronted Rebecca directly, at least not in writing. "I won't let you take everything from me," another letter read. "Not my company, not my house, and especially not my mother's. Security. She deserves peace after everything she's sacrificed." I carefully returned the letters to their hiding place, my mind whirling. If Rebecca had been having an affair while Anthony was alive, could Eric be her lover? If so, why was she so angry to see him at the house? That evening, Rebecca brought home takeout. Enough for two, I noticed with surprise. "I thought we could eat together," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "If you want." I accepted, hiding my suspicion behind a smile. We ate in awkward silence until she finally spoke. "About yesterday, Eric is a former colleague of Anthony's. We had a falling out after the funeral. I don't want to see him again." I nodded, not pushing for details she clearly didn't want to share. "I understand. I won't let him in if he comes back." She seemed relieved, though I wasn't sure if it was because of my acceptance of her explanation or my promise to keep Eric away. As I cleared the dishes, Rebecca lingered at the table. "The roses look nice," she said suddenly. "Anthony would have liked them." Before I could respond, she was gone, retreating to her room as she did every night. I stood in the kitchen, hands submerged in soapy water, considering this unexpected thaw. Was she genuinely warming to me? Or was this part of some strategy? Either way, I needed to maintain my calm, patient facade. Behind it, though, my determination only grew stronger. Something had happened between Anthony, Rebecca, and this mysterious Eric. Something that might explain why my son had felt the need to protect me from beyond the grave. And I was getting closer to figuring out exactly what it was. 3 months had passed since I moved into Anthony's house. The seasons had changed, summer fading into fall, and a tentative routine had developed between Rebecca and me. Not friendship, never that, but a wary coexistence. I continued to cook, clean, and garden. She continued to come and go as she pleased, though she'd started joining me for dinner more often than not. I was pruning the roses one crisp October afternoon when I heard raised voices from inside the house. I recognized Rebecca's immediately, but the other took me a moment. Eric. I moved closer to the patio doors, keeping out of sight. "You can't keep avoiding me," Eric was saying. "We had a deal." "That was before everything happened," Rebecca hissed. "Before Anthony changed the will." "That's not my problem." I held up my end. "I want what you promised." "Lower your voice. She might hear you." "The old lady? Who cares if she does? Anthony's gone." "There's nothing she can do?" I froze, barely breathing. "You don't understand," Rebecca said. "There's a clause in the will. If she leaves or if I force her out, she gets everything. Everything, Eric. The house, the money, his share of the business." Eric laughed a harsh sound. "So what? Wait her out. She's old. How long can she possibly live?" Rebecca's voice dropped, but I could still make out her words. "I can't wait. The business is struggling. I need cash now, not in 10 years when she finally kicks it. Then get rid of the will." Eric's voice was casual, as if he were suggesting she change the wallpaper. "I've tried. James won't budge. He says Anthony was very specific." "Not James, Becca. The will itself." A long silence followed. My hands trembled against the brick wall I was hiding behind. "That's illegal," Rebecca finally said, but her tone lacked conviction. "Only if you get caught. Look, we've come this far. Don't chicken out now." "I didn't sign up for this, Eric. Anthony wasn't supposed to—" She stopped abruptly. "Wasn't supposed— to what? Die? Change his will? Figure out what we were doing?" Another long pause. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice was strained. "Just go. I'll figure something out." "You better. I'm not waiting forever." The front door slammed moments later. I stayed frozen in place, processing what I'd heard. The business was struggling? That couldn't be right. Anthony had built a successful architectural firm. Unless— I retreated to my room, hands shaking as I retrieved Anthony's journal from beneath the floorboard. I reread the entries, looking for any mention of business troubles. There was nothing explicit, but there were references to Rebecca taking more control of the finances. I needed to speak with James. The next morning, after Rebecca left for what? She called a business meeting. I called Anthony's attorney. "Mrs. Palmer," he greeted me warmly. "How are you holding up?" "As well as can be expected," I said. "James, I need to ask you something important. Was Anthony's business in financial trouble before he died?" A hesitation. "Why do you ask?" "Please. It's important," James sighed. "He didn't want you to worry, but yes, there were some irregularities. Large sums of money had been transferred out of the business accounts. Anthony suspected embezzlement." My throat tightened. "By Rebecca?" "He couldn't prove it. That's part of why he changed his will, to protect what assets remained." "James, I need to see you. Today, if possible." 2 hours later, I sat in James's office as he laid out documents showing the suspicious transfers, all authorized by Rebecca, who Anthony had foolishly made a signatory on the business accounts. "Could this be prosecuted?" I asked. "Possibly, but it would be difficult to prove criminal intent. She was his wife, a partner in the business." "What about this?" I pulled out my phone and played a recording I'd made that morning. Rebecca and Eric's conversation from the day before, which I'd captured through the partially open patio door. James listened, his expression growing grave. "This changes things. This suggests knowledge and intent. It's not conclusive, but it's certainly grounds for investigation. If Rebecca altered or destroyed the will, what would happen? The estate would be in limbo, but I have the original in my safe. Any copy, Rebecca." "His would be just that, a copy." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. Can you do something for me? Can you contact Rebecca and tell her there's an issue with the will that needs to be discussed? James raised an eyebrow. What kind of issue? Tell her you've discovered a potential loophole, one that might allow her to contest the living arrangement. Mrs. Palmer, if I may ask, what are you planning? I looked him directly in the eyes. Justice for my son. The trap was set. James called Rebecca that afternoon, and as expected, she agreed to meet him the next day. That evening, she was almost cheerful, humming as she poured herself a glass of wine. You seem happy? I observed. Casually. Just had some good news. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Business stuff. Boring, really. I nodded and returned to my book, hiding my own grim satisfaction. Let her believe victory was within reach. It would make the fall that much harder. The next morning, I woke early and made Rebecca's favorite breakfast, French toast with fresh berries. She emerged from her room looking polished and confident, dressed in a sharp business suit. Big day? I asked innocently. Just some meetings. She glanced at her watch. I might be late tonight. Don't wait up. As soon as she left, I called James to confirm she was on her way to his office. Then I made another call to Detective Michael Roberts, an old friend of my husband's who had attended Anthony's funeral. I'd already spoken with him about my suspicions, and he'd agreed to help. She's on her way, I told him. You know what to do. While Rebecca was distracted with James, Detective Roberts and 2 officers would execute a search warrant on the house, looking specifically for evidence of financial fraud and any indications of tampering with the will. I had provided enough probable cause with the recording and financial documents to convince a judge. I paced nervously, waiting for news. Hours passed. Finally, my phone rang. James. It's done, he said. She took the bait, tried to bribe me. To lose the original will. The detective recorded everything. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by a bone-deep sadness. Anthony had been right about Rebecca. She had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and now she would face consequences. The front door burst open and Rebecca stormed in, her face twisted with rage. Behind her stood Detective Roberts and 2 uniformed officers. You! She spat, advancing toward me. You set me up. I stood my ground, meeting her fury with calm resolve. No, Rebecca. You set yourself up the moment you decided to steal from my son. Mrs. Wilson, Detective Roberts interjected. I'd advise you not to say anything further without an attorney present. Rebecca's eyes darted between us, the realization of her situation finally hitting her. The confident mask crumbled, revealing the desperate, cornered woman beneath. You don't understand, she pleaded, suddenly changing tactics. Anthony was controlling. He wouldn't let me have anything of my own. I needed security. So you stole from him? I asked quietly. And when that wasn't enough, you what? Watched him die? Her face paled. I didn't. That's not. Save it for the court, Detective Roberts said, taking her arm. Rebecca Wilson, you're under arrest for attempted bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. As they led her away, Rebecca looked back at me one last time, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it almost took my breath away. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, I said softly. It is. The door closed behind them, and I was left alone in the sudden, deafening silence of the house that had seen so much pain, betrayal, and now, finally, justice. The weeks following Rebecca's arrest passed in a blur of police statements, legal meetings, and quiet, numbing grief that returned like a tide now that the immediate crisis had ended. With Rebecca gone, I found myself truly alone in Anthony's house for the first time. The silence was both a comfort and a torment. No more hostility, but also no distraction from my loss. The investigation uncovered far more than I had imagined. Rebecca and Eric, who turned out to be her former college boyfriend, had systematically drained nearly $500,000 from Anthony's business over the course of 18 months. The money had been funneled into offshore accounts, luxury purchases, and a down payment on a condo in Rebecca's name only, her escape plan, presumably. More disturbing were the results of the toxicology review that I had requested. Anthony's tissue samples, preserved during autopsy, showed abnormally high levels of a vasoconstrictive medication, the same type found in Rebecca's bathroom cabinet, prescribed for her occasional migraines. While not definitively proven, the medical examiner acknowledged that prolonged high doses could increase blood pressure to dangerous levels, potentially contributing to an aneurysm rupture. "We can't say with absolute certainty that this caused his death," Detective Roberts explained gently. "But it's enough to expand the charges against her. The amended charges now included criminally negligent homicide." Rebecca maintained her innocence on that count, but the financial crimes and the attempted bribery of James were irrefutable. She accepted a plea deal, 15 years in prison, with possibility of parole after 10. Eric, faced with his own charges, quickly turned on Rebecca, providing evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. Neither would threaten our lives again. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. No punishment could bring Anthony back. No justice could fill the void his absence had created. One rainy afternoon, as I sat on the couch staring at old photo albums, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a young woman with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Mrs. Palmer? I'm Lisa Chen. I worked with Anthony at the firm." I invited her in, curious. She perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, clutching a cardboard box. "I found these in the office while we were sorting through everything," she explained, opening the box. "They're designs Anthony was working on before he got sick. Personal projects, not client work. I thought you might want them." Inside were dozens of sketches and blueprints, Anthony's distinctive architectural style evident in every line. I lifted them carefully, tears blurring my vision. "He was so talented," Lisa said softly. "The best of us. Everyone at the firm misses him terribly." "Thank you for bringing these," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Lisa smiled, then hesitated, before adding, "There's something else. We, the team at the firm, we want to keep Anthony's name in the company, rename it to include him as a memorial, but we wanted your permission first." For the first time in months, warmth bloomed in my chest. He would have loved that. After Lisa left, I spread the designs across the dining table, tracing Anthony's pencil marks with my fingertips. Most were residential projects, homes he'd dreamed of building someday. But one caught my eye. A simple yet elegant cottage with a wraparound porch and a rose garden. Across the top, he'd written "Mom's retirement dream." He'd been designing a home for me, a place where I could grow old, surrounded by beauty and comfort. I sat back, overwhelmed by a fresh wave of grief and love. Even in the midst of his troubled marriage, even as he suspected something was wrong, he'd been thinking of me, planning for my future. In that moment, I made a decision. I contacted James the next day. "I want to sell the house," I told him, "and I want to build something new." With Rebecca in prison and the legal proceedings concluded, Anthony's assets had reverted fully to me as his next of kin. The business, under new management with Anthony's name preserved, was recovering. The money recovered from Rebecca's accounts was substantial. I had the means to honor my son's final gift. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my new cottage, built exactly according to Anthony's design, down to the last detail. The rose garden was just beginning to bloom, red and yellow buds reaching toward the spring sunshine. From the porch swing, I could see the small lake Anthony had included in his plans, its surface glittering in the afternoon light. I wasn't alone on this momentous day. Mark, Anthony's best friend had become my friend too, checking on me regularly and helping oversee the construction. Lisa and the team from the firm had come for the small housewarming, bearing gifts and stories about Anthony that made me laugh, for the first time in what felt like forever. Even my older son, David, who had been distant for years due to his own struggles, had reconnected after Anthony's death, and Rebecca's arrest made national news. He stood beside me now, his arm around my shoulders. "He would have loved this place, Mom," David said, surveying the cottage. "It's exactly what he would have wanted for you." "I know," I replied, patting his hand. "That's why I had to build it." Later, after everyone had gone, I sat alone on the porch swing as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. I held Anthony's watch in my hand, running my thumb over the inscription I'd added on the back. "Time reveals truth. Love endures." Rebecca had taken so much from me: my son, my security, my trust. For months, she had tried to strip away my dignity as well, treating me as nothing more than an unwelcome burden. She had seen me as powerless, an old woman to be pushed aside, locked away, forgotten. But she had underestimated me, underestimated a mother's love, a mother's intuition, a mother's determination to protect her child's legacy. In the end, Anthony had won. His last act of love, that crucial clause in his will, had given me the time and proximity I needed to uncover the truth. He couldn't save himself, but he had saved me. I closed my eyes, breathing in the sweet scent of roses on the evening breeze. For the first time since I'd stood in that funeral home, looking down at my son's still face, I felt something like peace. Anthony was gone. But here, in this place he had designed with such care, his love surrounded me. Not in grand monuments or dramatic gestures, but in the simple, enduring comfort of a home built from love. Rebecca had mocked me at the funeral, calling me the old lady, bound for a deposito de idosos, a storage facility for the elderly. She had seen my age as weakness, my grief as vulnerability. How wrong she had been. I opened my eyes and looked out at the garden, at life blooming where before there had been only barren ground. Transformation, renewal. Not a shrine to the past, but a living testament to continuing forward. "I'm still here, Anthony," I whispered to the gathering darkness. "I'm still here and I'm going to be all right." In the quiet of my new beginning, that felt like truth enough.